What's up everyone, my name is Issey and I'm an animator. Today we're going to be designing a character from start to finish. I will be keeping in mind that we're exporting for Lottie, but these principles apply to any type of character design. I've seen more and more people update character designs and animations to Dribble and Lottie files and on Instagram as well. So I thought that I would share how I do it. If this is helpful to anyone, let me know. Give me a thumbs up if there are any tips in here that are helpful to you, or leave a comment if you have a different way of doing things. I'd be really interested to know. I think that it's great if people in this industry can help each other, especially when this technology is so new. So let's get into it. So I have a blank Illustrator canvas here. What I'm actually going to do is I am going to go to Artboard and I'm going to make it a square. I'm going to start with a square. If you want to keep your perfect square, a perfect circle, remember to hold shift as you're dragging the size of your circle or rectangle. So this is going to be our face. What I'm going to do is pick these little corner circles and round them up, let's say almost all the way, and then these ones I'm going to round them completely. So it's not completely round, it's not completely rectangular either, but you can obviously do whatever you want. This is just the way I'm going to do it today. Now for the eyes, I am going to go for a full circle and I'm going to place it somewhat here. Now a few shortcuts that I do use a lot in Illustrator. Copying in place, I use it all the time. Command-Shift-V. So it's Control-C or Command-C for copy, and then Command-Shift-V or Control-Shift-V to paste in place. This allows me to count how many steps I'm moving away from my original copying source. That I use it a lot for masking as well, which is really helpful when you're designing characters for Lottie. And I'll get into that a little bit more later and how to navigate masks in After Effects for Lottie. Let's do a nose. I'm going to do something similar to what I did with the head. I'm going to start with a square. I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to round these bottom corners completely, and then these top corners just a little bit. So I kind of get a bit of that triangular shape, and then I'm going to squish it just a bit. Yeah, so we get it. That little button nose effect. I'm just gonna group these eyes, make sure that everything is aligned in center. Perfect. It is important to keep things aligned as much as possible, or to keep a good rhythm, I find, especially before you start rigging. Because if you start misaligning elements as you go, the more elements you add, the more disjointed things are going to be. So I just find it best to keep things clean so you know exactly where things are supposed to be and you don't get any little surprises later on. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to align. I'm going to move on to the ears. I'm going to start with a big square and I'm going to round it completely because I'm not sure if I still need that square shape later on. So make sure it's rounded completely. I'm going to keep them quite low because I find that it usually looks a little more cutesy. And before we move on, we have to do the most important step, which is Command-S to save your file. Okay, so let me just call this Lottie character. Now, I know that I could be using the Illustrator Symmetry tool, but I haven't used it that much. I just find that I'm so used to working like this, but it probably could save you some time. Let's ungroup these eyes, and I'm going to start adding little pupils inside so that then I can get a better sense of sizes of things. Now what you do want to keep in mind is the hierarchy of shapes. So what makes a character interesting is to have features that are exaggerated. So if you want to make your eyes big, then you're going to want to make your nose and your mouth small so that your eyes look even bigger. So right now, for example, I'm making the ears really, really big, so I might make my nose a tad bit smaller. So I'm just going to scale that down. And I might also make the mouth a tad bit smaller. Same with the eyes, I'm gonna try and keep them quite large. Now another way to keep things centered as you start adding circles within circles, I find, is to just copy and paste your first circle and then look for the scale tool. I usually just end up, if you're on Mac, I find it very efficient to just search for things that you're looking for instead of going into the menu or looking for it in your properties bar on the side. It's just my way of working. I just find that it's faster. Okay, so let's go with the 80%. And then I'm gonna do that again. Scale, and we're gonna do 50%. There we go. I'm gonna copy, paste that, make sure it's in the center, and I'm just gonna shift this a little to the side so it looks like she's looking at us dead center. I feel like these are a little big. I'm just gonna scale them down a little bit by 80%. Now they're looking a little small, so I'm just gonna eyeball it and then, oops, and then paste it into place. I'm gonna rotate that nose because I made a mistake earlier. I want the bottom bit to be rounder. Let's see. I think I want the eyes to be a little bigger. I'm just gonna go ahead and tweak things right now. Move things around a little bit. And there's no rule to this. It's really more about, you know, what look you want to go for. One of the best tricks I found in character design is to keep reiterating, keep doing as many examples as possible. What I actually end up doing a lot of times is I do one version and then I copy and paste it into place, and I do another version, and then I copy paste it into place, and then I do another version, and then I do another version, and I do maybe 15 to 30 to 50 versions. You should see my files. I do a crazy amount of reiterations, but that's because your first iteration is always going to be your worst, and it's only going to keep getting better. So depending on how much time you have, I highly recommend to just keep going, and you'll get faster, you'll start to develop a system, and you'll especially start to get better. And I find that that's one of the best ways to improve. I feel like this character needs more of a 3D face effect. I feel like I want to give more roundedness to the face, and if you think of a sphere, you want, you know, certain points in your face to come out more and others to fade out. So to give that, you know, aspect of that this is three-dimensional. So I usually use the pen tool to draw a line. You could use the line tool, it's the same. And then I use one of my favorite tools in Illustrator. I use this all the time, the curvature tool. And I try to click dead center if I can. And I'm just gonna pull this up and create a curve. See this nice curve? And I want the hair to sort of fall on her eyes. And I'm gonna make this a line and remove the fill. So how to build the hair. So I just shared one of my favorite tools, the curvature tool. My other favorite tool is the, I don't know what it's called, but it's the Shift M shortcut. So what I want to do is I want to keep the shape of her head, and I just want to cut out a piece on the forehead. So instead of going in and drawing it around, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make this line, I'm just gonna close it so now it's a shape. And if I were to add color in, this is what, you know, where the black of the hair would be. I'm gonna go ahead and select that face shape. I'm gonna copy it and paste it into place. So now it's on top of everything. And now comes the fun part. I'm gonna select both shapes. So I've selected both this black rectangle hair thing and the face, and I'm gonna go ahead and press Shift M. Now you'll see your cursor's changed to it has a little plus symbol next to it. And what this does, it allows me to select the shapes that I want and to merge them. So for example, if I click and drag and I select all of the shapes, all of this now becomes one. Let's make it big color. All of this becomes one shape. Now if you hold the Option key on Mac, or I believe it's Alt key on Windows, the plus turns to a minus, which means you can remove the shapes that you don't want. And you can also drag to select all the shapes that you don't want. So right now I'm gonna delete this big black rectangle thing, and I'm also gonna delete this front part. Now that I'm left with is this little piece of front bangs. And I find this very, very helpful to increase the speed in your workflow, to keep lines crisp and clear, so that I don't have any gaps with the head. I know that this curve is exactly of the same head shape below. I'm gonna go ahead and use the same technique and cut out a few little cuts in her hair, so it looks more like hair and not like she has like a, what is it called, a bathing suit hat or a bowl on her head. So tips to making a triangle: you always want the tip of the triangle to be in the middle, right? So what you can do is, I use the A shortcut, which is basically switching between these two selection tools. So V is the standard black cursor selection tool, which allows you to select a shape and move it around. And the A shortcut, which selects the direct selection tool, allows you to pick the points of a shape. So this is really helpful when you need to go in and say I make a group out of these 3 eye shapes. If I wanted to just select, say, the whites in the middle, if I were to use the direct selection tool, it would select the whole group. But if I go in and click A and I select what I need, I can then go ahead and make changes to this shape, even though they're in a group. So to make a rectangle, I use the pen tool and I create a point here right in the middle. See, this pink line is telling me this is right in the middle. So now that I have a point up there, I'm going to click A and I'm going to select this corner and I'm going to delete it. So now I have the beginning of an edge of a triangle. If I want to close this shape, because right now, as you can see, between this point and this point, it's not closed. So if I were to remove the fill and just see the line, these lines aren't connecting. So if I want to connect them, fastest way is to use the shortcut Command J, J for joint or joining, Command J. And it says to join, you must select 2 endpoints of the same or 2 different paths. Not sure why it's saying that. I'm just gonna select it again and do Command J. Okay, now it works. I don't know why it didn't work earlier. Delete that point, Command J, close the shape. And now I have a triangle where the tip is perfectly in the middle. And if you need to reshape this triangle, you can just scale it up and down. All right, so I'm gonna place it right here in the middle. Make sure it's aligning right with the middle of the face. Sometimes what I do is I actually draw a line to make sure that everything's always aligned. So I draw a line and make sure that this line is indeed aligned with the center of the face. And now I just know that, I can always check that this is aligned. You could also create a guide. So with Command R, I get the rulers up here and I can pull out a guide. So this line is a different color, but I don't know. Sometimes I just like to create a line. I think I want it a little wider. Actually, see, that line is very helpful. I need it. So I'm gonna make this triangle wider and I'm gonna select that hair piece that we created earlier, use Shift M, hold the Option or Alt key and delete what I do not want. Now there's actually a copy of this underneath. I'm gonna delete that. There we go. I'm actually gonna go back a few steps because I'd like to reuse that triangle shape. So I'm just gonna click undo and copy this triangle shape. So I have it copied in my clipboard. I'm gonna go ahead and redo what I just did earlier. Shift M, hold Option key, whoops, do a cutout. And now I can do Command Shift V and paste that triangle back in place like I had it earlier. And I'm gonna do 2 cutouts on each side of her face. So I'm gonna make this triangle just a little smaller. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now sometimes if I want to verify that this triangle is at equal distance of this edge to this edge, I find that the fastest way to do, I don't know if this is the fastest way, but this is sometimes what I do, is I just create a shape that matches exactly that gap, and then I copy or I just drag it to the other edge and then match it, and then delete that piece that I do not need. There we go. Same cutout, Shift M, hold Option, cut and cut. There we go. And now because I want to give it that rounded effect, I need to go ahead and select these edges and then curve them just a little bit. So it looks like it's a curved shape. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, make sure you save. All right, so now I'm going to create little bunny ears that are disguised as a bow in her hair. So I'm just gonna create an oval here. I'm gonna move it all the way to the back, Command Shift left bracket. And what I'm also going to do is select that curvature tool, and I don't want this oval to be too perfect. I think that it's great to use geometric shapes like circles and squares as a reference, but then if you can tweak it just a little bit, it makes things just appear more organic. I actually want the bow in her hair to kind of taper a little bit more outwards on these outer edges. So I'm gonna use my curvature tool, select that outer point, and just curve it out just a little bit. So it has more of that, you know, natural bunny ear shape. It's not always just a perfect oval. I'm gonna copy it, paste in place, drag it out. I'm gonna redraw that line at the center again as a reference. And I'm gonna create an oval at the center for her bow. Select everything, send it to the back. Just gonna shift these out just a little bit. Move it down, delete this center line. Actually, you know what? I'm actually gonna create a guide because for that center line. So Command R to bring out the rulers. I'm gonna drag out a line here and align it smack in the center. Delete that line that I don't need, hide the rulers that I don't need. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it's easy to hide and show the guides when you need them if you hold Command and semicolon. So when I don't want to see them, I can just hide it. So I feel like her chin here is a little low. Okay, so I think that her hair just needs to be longer. So I'm gonna pull up her chin. I'm gonna grab everybody, scale it up, move it down, and then with this, let's move everything down first. And then let's see if I can just grab these points, see if I can keep that same shape. Now it's not perfect here on the sides, just bothering me a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do it the difficult way. I'm gonna start over. Once you get a hang of this technique, I feel like it's pretty fast.
So bad.
Alright, one last thing are the brows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a gray color, and on top I'm going to draw a curved line, remove the fill, and add a stroke, a black stroke. I'm going to make it very thick, and I'm going to make a rounded stroke, make it even thicker. Copy it, paste in place, flip it around. I'm actually gonna grab all of these points, see if I can move them up a little bit. Alright, I feel like this is looking pretty good. Now we're moving on to color. Okay. I really like playing with color a lot. I feel like it adds a lot to the world, and I like to spend a lot of time tweaking color. And what I'm also going to go ahead and do is go to my swatches panel and delete all of these colors, because I feel like they affect my my eyes, and I usually delete them from the start when I open an Illustrator file, because I just don't like seeing them. I feel like they're a world of their own, and they have nothing to do with the project that we're working on, so I prefer just not to see them. I'm going to show you my approach to playing with color. Illustrator usually sets you in this RGB color mode, but I like to switch to HSB. H for hue, so color, blue, red, yellow. S for saturation, if you want more of that tint or if you want less of a tint, and B for black, so darkness or lightness. I just feel like it's very simple for me to pick colors in HSB mode, and maybe you'll see a little bit what I'm talking about. I don't really know how to explain, I just know that I find the process very helpful for me. So for example, I know that I want to go for a skin tone color, and it's between yellow and red because it's kind of in that orange beige area. So I'm just going to set my hue around there. And then in terms of saturation, I'm just gonna, saturation and darkness, I just keep tweaking those. As long as I know that I'm in the right hue range, and if I wanna just tweak it a tad bit more towards yellow, I can just use my arrow key and move that value up or move it down towards red. So let's just tweak this till we get more of a skin tone color. I do know that I want this character to have more of a darker skin tone, not as much of a light one. I feel like a lot of characters are always look white, and I feel like we need more diversity. Let's get this character looking a little more tan. All right, I'm gonna go with this for now, and I'll see if I want to change it later. Right now I'm just going to color everything that I want in a skin tone color. For the mouth, I'm going to pick that skin tone color, and then I'm just going to make it a tad darker with stroke width. What I'm also going to do is everything that's a tad bit darker, I'm going to shift it towards red a little bit. A little bit more. Same for the nose. Let's see how that goes. Because we know that your lips and your nose tend to have more of a red tone to them because of blood flow. That's what we're going to do today. So for example, the reason why I have these squares here on the side is, for instance, I want the stroke of the mouth to have the same color as the nose, but if I use my color picker, it's just going to pick the fill, and then I have to switch them, but then I've lost all of my stroke properties. I made it thicker, I had made it rounded, so I lose a lot of time. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, actually, you know what, I don't even need these. I'm just gonna go ahead and take this color, and I'm gonna go to my empty swatches panel, and I'm gonna add this this color here. So I clicked on this. What you can do as well is you can select multiple colors, and you can click that folder icon, and it'll add a swatches. It'll add the swatches in a folder for you. Whoopsies, what did I do? So now I can just go ahead, select that stroke, and then pick the right color. And that's much faster than having to go and change all of your fill properties and such. Sometimes it does help to lean back a little bit Now, I feel like this is looking a little bit flat. Everything, especially the ears, look flat. So we're gonna make the ears darker to make them look like they're further back and so that the face is popping out. But before that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a very subtle gradient to her face because I want her chin area to be in shadow. And if you look at my chin, it's probably a little darker here than it is here. I don't know, I can't really see. But my neck probably looks darker because my face is more forward and the sunlight is hitting me from here, so it's casting a shadow. I am going to go ahead and go to the gradient panel, select fill, and I'm going to create, should I go with a linear gradient? I'm gonna go with a linear gradient today. And I'm gonna go ahead and pick that skin color on both sides. And then I'm going to select one of the gradient sliders and switch to HSB mode and make that just a little bit darker. And what I'm doing every time I go darker is I'm also adding a bit of saturation. Okay, we're going to rotate it because right now it's going from left to right. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, flip it, there we go. So now I know that the dark is here. And I feel like the dark is too dark. Now what you want to do with gradients to make it look slightly a bit 3D is to make the variation in color, in gradient color, very subtle. So it's barely noticeable. Because if you make it too much, like for example like this, it doesn't look 3D anymore, right? Same with if I had to make it saturated, it doesn't look 3D anymore. All right. What you can also do is slide this, or it's the same point here, this little white point, slide it down. There. If I lean back, it's very, very subtle. I'm not sure if I like it like this right now, but I'm gonna select the ears and apply that same gradient to the ears. Then I'm going to select the gradient tool here and I'm going to rotate it and I'm going to move it and I'm also going to make this a tad bit more saturated, the dark a bit more saturated. Let's just enter 53. And the thing with color is it's really subjective, and the more you play around with it, the better you'll get. But it's really about just keep tweaking, and tweak very subtly every time. All right. What I'm gonna do with this ear is I'm just gonna grab this one, move it across, and I'm just going to flip it. So then the dark is here on this side. Delete the one that's underneath, paste that in place, and then move it to the back. So see, now it's separating that face from the ears a little bit, which is exactly what I wanted. As for the face, I'm gonna copy that gradient. Now I'm actually gonna see if I change it to, instead of a linear gradient, I change it to a radial, and I left the light color in the center and the darker color on the edges. If I can tweak that, let's see if it looks better. And yeah, the other thing with color is you never really know. You just have to keep experimenting and having fun with it. Oops. Let's see. I really want this gradient to be subtle. I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know. Let's make her bow red in her hair. I feel like a lot of times people have a lot of questions for other artists or other creative professionals on, you know, tips and tricks on color. What do you use for color? What do you do? And I think that a lot of times people start with looking for an inspirational palette, so they look at other people's works. It doesn't have to be other people's, you know, similar works. It could also be, say, if I'm doing a character, I could look at pictures of, you know, photographs of landscapes, of other painters, of architects, or even of pictures that I've taken, and start from there, and then start pulling those colors, try to understand what they've done. A bit of color theory can help, but I find that it's really about just keep tweaking it and playing around with it, and you'll only keep getting better. All right, another tip with color is to check your values. So now we're going into a bit of color theory here, but this is a trick that I found that's really helpful. Okay, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm actually just going to fill the whole artboard, and I'm going to make this gray. Okay, just pick a gray, so no color, no saturation. Do is also just color pick the color of the Illustrator software background here. And then I'm going to go to transparency, and I am going to, I believe, is go to color. Yeah, go to color. And I'm going to go back to my layers and lock this layer. So I can no longer select this layer, but I can see my values because of that transparency mode. And now I can see that I have a lot of color contrast around the eyes, right? Which is very important because I need it to pop and I need people to watch the eyes. See if it makes a difference if I make this gray just a little lighter. Because I just want to look at the difference between the bow and her hair and such. So I feel like another tip with value I find that I learned is to squint. So squeeze your eyes and squint at your work, and how many types of grays can you see? By squinting, I can see right now that her hair isn't dark enough. It looks too much like her skin color, but I can see her eyes very distinctly. And her bow in her hair is probably not dark enough either. So I'm gonna go ahead, lock this layer again, and hide it. And I'm gonna bring more saturation to her hair color, and maybe make it a tad bit darker, because saturation is going to increase your value. The more saturated and the more dark, and you can just turn that layer back on and see. So if I were to go in full saturation, see I've made it a lot darker. Or if I undo that, if I make it darker, it also just makes the shade darker. See, I'm gonna add more saturation and just a bit more darkness, and squint. And I feel like we're starting to see that her hair is separated from the tone of her skin. But now her bow in her hair is too similar. So I'm gonna make that a bit darker. All right, let's see what we've done. What does this look like? Okay, I think it doesn't look too bad, but her hair is a little too rusty for me. So maybe let's change the hue. All right, I'm gonna sacrifice just a little bit of value. Cool. I'm going to use the same gradient effect in the bow of her hair to make it darker a little bit here towards the top of her head. So I'm gonna go ahead and select all of these shapes, and I'm gonna add all of these swatches here to a new folder. So now I can see all the colors that I'm working with, and they're easier to select. And if I start changing things, I know that I've saved these colors. I also see that I have two colors here that are very similar. It's probably from the nose and mouth. I'm gonna delete this folder. Yeah, so the nose is this color and the mouth is this one. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select the same color as the nose, and I'm gonna delete this one because I want to work with a palette that's as simple as possible. I don't want too many crazy colors. Just want to keep it very simple for now. All right, so let's go ahead and add a gradient to her bow. I'm gonna go to the gradient tab. I'm gonna select the fill, and we're gonna do a linear gradient. I'm gonna go ahead, and if you double click, it opens this window, and you can go to your swatches here. That's why I save them. It's easier to access from your gradient menu. There we go. So I'm gonna select this point, and I'm just gonna make it back to HSB. See, if I want to make it darker, I just go ahead and drag this darker slider, and maybe bump up, I'm gonna bump up illustration to saturation to full, make it just a bit darker. Okay, let's rotate it by 90 degrees and flip them so the dark is towards the bottom. Let's see, is this, I think it's a little bit too dark. It's a little bit too much. Remember, gradients have to be very subtle. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, drag the slider so we have a bit more red. And I'm actually gonna make the tips of her bow a little lighter. Because remember, we said we made it darker so that the values were different from her hair, but because the tips are further away, we can make them a little lighter so they can catch a little bit of light. Let's check out the values again. Doot. And you can see, we can see that subtle gradient there. And I think it looks great. I think we can see it around here, the corners of the ears too, and her chin. I think that's looking pretty good. Yep, passes the squint test. Just gonna make that tip a little bit lighter just to see. Too light. Okay, I'm gonna also add a very subtle gradient to her hair so it doesn't look as flat. So same technique. Gonna go in, I'm actually gonna do a radial gradient like her face. Gonna go ahead and select the hair color. Oops. And we're going to make one side a little lighter. Go. And now I'm going to bring out the gradient tool and see what's going on. So I'm actually going to use the gradient tool and draw and reposition the gradient slider, because I know that I want the lightest part to be at the top here and the darkest part to go down to her bangs. So I'm going to select there, and I'm actually thinking this could be linear. It doesn't have to be radial. There we go. So light here, dark down there. They're actually inversed. Flip. So I feel like her dark is looking a little brown gray, so I'm going to add a bit more saturation. The reason why I'm making the top of her head lighter is because that's where the light is coming from. So if you have the light coming from this direction or from this direction, it's going to touch these tips first, and then this is going to be darker, right? And this is going to be darker. So same with the hair, the light is going to come from here, and it's going to touch here, so everything here is going to be darker. But right now we're actually pretending, that the light is coming this way. So that's why this is lighter, and then this is going to be more in shade. Same thing here. This is lighter, and this is going to be more in shade. That we're pretty much done with the design. You can still go on and tweak as much as you want, but I think we've covered shape, we've covered value, and we're ready to move on to animation. So the next step is going to be exporting for After Effects, then rigging, and then animating. Let me know in the comments what you thought, if there's anything that you would have done differently, or if there was anything new that you learned. If you would like more videos like this, please leave a thumbs up so I know that this is the type of content that you like. And yeah, see you in the next one for animation. Bye!